So welcome everyone. High Road Leaders is really happy to have Scott Simon with us here today. Scott has been a firefighter for many years. He'll tell a little bit about himself as he gets going, but his years of experience have definitely shown that there's a lot of need, a lot of questions, a lot of stuff around crisis management and leadership. So we do welcome everybody. And Scott, again, introduce yourself. Oh, well, actually, sorry, before I say that, any questions, comments, please put them into the chat. I will make sure Scott gets it, or if it's a question that needs to be asked right then and there, we will do it. Either I will do it or get you guys to do it yourself. And they said we're going to go, when Scott's done his presentation, we're going to then have a time for questions and answers. So welcome, we're High Road Leaders we're from Canada, but we are definitely reaching internationally. So thank you very much. And Scott, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Sterling, and thank you everybody for being here. Before we get started, I want to thank Julie and Sterling for putting this on. I'm really excited to be presenting, and I can't wait to have a great discussion. Before I get started, I want to be completely upfront with everybody. The stories that I do tell today are real. Sometimes they can be disturbing. If you find yourself triggered, please log out, step away, do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. I've been a firefighter for almost 3 decades. And in that time, I've had many experiences. I've responded to many different crises and emergencies, and I've stood next to people on some of the worst days of their lives. These experiences have taught me many lessons, and I've found myself teaching these lessons and helping my friends and family. I've seen the impact that these lessons have had, and I hope that by sharing these stories, they can have an impact on you as well today. My speaking journey started with a phone call from a friend. He was a strong type A personality, owner of a multi-million-dollar company, and he had had a really disturbing experience. He'd been sitting at his daughter's high school basketball game when the referee collapsed from a heart attack. Even though this man was trained in first aid and CPR, he didn't react. In fact, he froze. And they called me because they wanted to know why. Now, the only reason that I could come up with to give him is the emotions that we all experience during a crisis. We all go through a period of denial. We all hyper-focus. We all have fear. And we often look for a leader. I understand these emotions because I've gone through them myself, not a year before. I'd taken my kids to Harvey Passage. Now, if you've never been to Harvey Passage, it's a great little spot along the Bow River. The river, it's about 600 meters long, and the river winds along, and there's different features and drops. And the kids could go up to the top, jump in, and float all the way down, swim all the way down. And then the river slows down at the bottom where they can easily get to shore and climb out. Now, that day we had found ourselves a perfect little spot. I was about halfway down the passage, and the kids headed up to jump in one more time. I was sitting there under the shade of the tree, watching for my kids to come around the corner when I saw this man. Now, everything appeared fine, but something inside me told me, he's not right. There's a problem here. It was something about how he was moving. And as I watched him float down, I felt that first emotion, that denial. It's such a beautiful day. I'm sure he's fine. As he got closer and closer, I kept watching him because he just wasn't moving right. Although he was with his friends and he seemed okay, he wasn't moving right. And then I moved into fear. But it wasn't fear of jumping into the water. It was fear of causing a scene. I didn't want to cause a social disturbance. I didn't want to make things a big deal that were small. And as I struggled between fear and denial, and I watched him go past me, I heard a man come up beside me. He wanted to see what I was looking at. And all I heard was the words, "Do you see that too?" And that was the confirmation that I needed to go, there's a problem here. I sprinted off. As I started running down the shoreline, I hyper-focused. I didn't yell. I didn't scream for help. All I did was focus on the problem. I zeroed in on what I could do instead of stepping back and looking at the bigger picture to go, hey, there's a better way to do this. As I reached the edge of the water is when he dropped under the water for the first time. As I entered the water and started swimming towards him, He disappeared completely. By then, a crowd had gathered, and 2 or 3 other people had jumped in to try and help. With the crowd on the shore directing us, we eventually found him. We dragged him to shore. We started CPR. We got a pulse back, but unfortunately, he later died in hospital. Now, I look back on that situation and I think to myself, if I'd have done a better job of managing those emotions, if I'd have done a better job of managing my denial and my fear, if I hadn't hyper focused or waited for confirmation, could that day have turned out differently? I often look at how those emotions have helped me or affected me in other areas of my life, especially in the business world. Have you ever been in a situation where you're leader of a team and you have a bad teammate, a toxic teammate? Have you ever been in a situation like that? Do you go through those emotions? Do you go through a period of denial? No, he's a good human. He's a good guy. He wouldn't be sabotaging our team. And then you go through fear. Well, really, I don't know what I'm doing. And he has a point. So you kind of go into this fear. I don't want to cause waves. Letting this man go or approaching him would be very awkward. And then you go into hyper focus. You start trying to solve all the problems that he's raised. And you look for some leadership, which you end up looking to the wrong people. Have you guys ever gone through a situation like that? Now, I want to give you some strategies that can help you to manage these emotions. And the first one is to breathe. And I believe Steve said he's been through many crises, and he could probably speak to it as well. But breathing is the number one thing you can do. What it does is moves you from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system. It calms things down. What we do on the fire ground is we do what we call box breathing. You breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, and breathe out for 4. The next strategy that you can use, I forgot my slides, guys. The next strategy after breathing is what Chris Voss calls his FMDJ voice. Now, the FMDJ voice is probably one of the greatest de-escalation tools I've ever used in my career. It doesn't matter what the situation is or where I'm at. If you talk low and slow in your communication, everything seems to de-escalate. Now, I've used this at fire situations. I've used this at horrible car accidents, and I've used it in working with my kids and my hockey teams. When you talk low and slow, everybody slows down. The next strategy is just to know you're the leader. One of the most dangerous parts we can go through during a crisis is we all have this search for certainty. We all find ourselves looking for someone because the situation is so unfamiliar. We're not 100% certain what we should do. So we end up looking for a leader. Now, the biggest challenge is the people who are the loudest and most certain in a crisis often are incorrect. They're often being carried by emotion, and they can lead you down some dark paths or lead you down a dangerous direction. And then the last strategy that I would touch on is make sure all your solution or all your communication is solution focused. It's so easy to hyper focus, and we run into that with firefighters when they pull up to a scene. You show up and there's 3 houses burning and there's people screaming, and you can find yourself hypnotized by the flames. You can find yourself staring at it. Or you can find yourself, your brain will light up saying, what are we going to do? And if you can move your communication to solution focus, everybody starts looking for solutions on how we can help instead of what's going on. It's a way to move forward. Now, the next thing, before we go any further, have you guys had those emotions, or has anybody ever experienced those emotions?
No? You can unmute and just reach out.
Yeah, for sure. And the breathing part and the DJ voice part, I can see. I never heard it called that before, but that's amazing. When I've had it with a lot of customers who just blow up, and I simply say to them, look, I'm not talking to you unless we're talking. We're not screaming, we're not yelling. We're talking and we're communicating. And yeah, no, getting it calm and getting some breath in, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and even if they are yelling, and if you keep replying to them in a calm, low, slow state,
Yeah.
they'll de-escalate really quick. The place that I find it the most shocking is with kids. A kid will be
Yeah.
freaking out, and you use that, and everything settles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I talk a lot about crisis leadership. We talk about the 7 principles. These are the principles here, but today we're going to talk about 2 specifically. We're going to talk about the be aware principle and the be strong principle. The be aware principle, we all know in life, in business, in any aspect, things go wrong, things happen. I've coached hockey for a long time, and we always teach our players to be aware of what's going on the ice so they can anticipate the hit and not lose momentum. And I believe it's the same in life and business. When you can see a problem coming, you can anticipate it, you can brace for it. Just like a hockey player, you get tight to the boards and you don't let it take all your momentum away. So I want to give you guys some strategies on. So in hockey, we call it playing with your head up. On the fire ground, we talk about situational awareness. Situational awareness is the more you know that's going on, the better idea you have of when you can push in, become more aggressive, and when you need to pull back. In business, we just call it leadership. It's a leader's job to anticipate what's coming and prepare for it. So I want to give you some strategies to start with that. And the first one is 360 degrees, 1,000-foot view. We use this on the fire ground quite a bit. And when we roll up to a good fire or any situation, the first thing we have officers do is get out of the engine and do a complete 360 of the building. And what that does is gives you a different perspective. Often what's happening on the front of a building is totally different than what's happening on the back. And you can sit in front of a house and it looks like nothing's going on in front. You can send your guys in just to find out that down in the basement, it's a walkout basement, and there's a roaring fire in the basement. So it's important that you get out and you do a walk around. While you're doing your walk around, you set your objectives. You set the goals for what you're going to try and accomplish. That's where we talk about that solution-focused communication. Once you've finished your walk around, the next thing we teach you is to get back in the truck. Remove yourself from the chaos. As a leader, you need to step above it. You need to poke your head above the crowd so you can take a breath, look at what's going on, and plan for the future. So one of the recommendations I have for people in business, now it's really easy in your business to talk about, yeah, great, Scott, that's a great idea to be away from everything, but I'm the chief cook and bottle washer. So what I recommend to people is on your way to work in the morning or on the way home from work, take a moment, take a breath, and give yourself a 360-degree view of what's going on in your business, what's going on in your life, and think about it looking from above. As you give yourself that perspective from above, it gives you an easier way to manage things. You don't find yourself in the thick of it. One of the challenges we have, so when we go into a fire, the captain and the new officers, we have to teach them that they're hands off. They're off the tools. The more off the tools you become, the better your situational awareness. So that's the 1,000-foot, 360-degree view. The next thing we talk about is know your risk profile. Now, we all understand that there's risks that we're aware of, but for every risk we're aware of, there's more risks lying beneath. I was an aquatic rescuer. I was with the dive team for quite some time. And my risk profile looked like this. Scuba diving in itself was dangerous. Scuba diving under ice, that was too dangerous. But I would never scuba dive under ice at night. That was just too far outside the risk profile. Now, I use this in my personal life. We were driving home from Vancouver, my son and I. He was 16 last year. And on the way home, he was driving. And I said, son, what's your risk profile right now? He said, well, Dad, I'm a new driver. I'm on roads I've never been on. I'm getting tired and it's getting dark. And as soon as we became conscious of the risks, it became really easy to make that decision. Okay, now it's time to change drivers. Now, the same goes in your business. You need to understand the risks that you're taking. I'm not saying don't take risks. They're part of business. I'm suggesting understand what the risks are. I ran an Amazon business for a long time, and I never really paid attention to my risk profile. But one of the challenges I ran into is one day Amazon phoned and said, you know what? The product you're selling, we don't want you to sell it anymore. And within a day, my business was completely shut down. I had one avenue to my customer. If I'd have looked closer at my risk profile, I should have had parallel businesses running. So I ask you, what's your risk profile? Are there risks that you're aware of in your business? And for every risk that you're aware of, what's the ones underneath? The next strategy I suggest to people is what we call a signpost theory. Now, a signpost theory works like a caution light or a warning sign on the side of the highway. I believe life gives you signs. There's certain things before stuff goes completely off track, life will give you signs. On the fire ground, when we're sitting in the command van, there's certain things, certain phrases that we listen for on the radio. We listen for, this is a hoarder house. There's fire above us. There's fire below us. Or phrases like, we can't see. There's 16 phrases that we listen for that if we hear them, we know things are about to go wrong. We know we don't have to pull out, but we better become hyper aware of what's going on, and we better start preparing for things to go wrong, because those phrases are a sign that things are about to go wrong. Same thing in my personal life. Fire hall as well. 2 a.m. 2 a.m. And I tell my kids this all the time. You don't have to be home by 2 a.m. I'm not saying stop the party, but I'm saying at 2 a.m., you better start paying attention. That's when people make poor decisions. That's when bad things start to happen. Now, the question becomes, in your business, what are the signposts?
What are some of those phrases that you look for, Scott?
In a fire?
Well, you said there were 16 phrases that you look for.
There's 16. The hoarder house, we can't see, we're getting low on air, fire above, fire below. There's just little phrases, and they've done numerous studies on these phrases precipitate a mayday. They're the sign that it's coming. So same in your business, and this is what I encourage everyone to do is, so this picture on this slide is a perfect example. This is us. We're in the middle of doing a rescue. We're about 100 feet above the weir on the Bow River. Now, if you go into the weir, you're not getting out of the weir. You're definitely not coming out alive. Now, these young girls were floating down the river in their rafts. There are signs all over the side of that river, but they weren't looking for the signs. So if you're not looking for the signs, they don't help you. You have to go, okay, what are the signs I'm looking for? So some of the signs in my business that I look for, has the person I'm negotiating, if I'm in the middle of negotiating and the person subtly says that he has a law firm on retainer, or he's been to small claim court, that's a flag for me, right? If my top salesman starts leaving for lunch or coming in late or starts showing up dressed up like he's looking for another job, I better trigger that, hey, there's a problem here. Same with a toxic culture. You can feel it start to shift before it's become toxic. And what I'm encouraging everybody to do is become very aware of what those signs are. That gives you the ability to take action. Stop it before it happens. Are you guys with me so far?
We are good, Scott. Keep going.
We are. Okay, so that's kind of just a touch on the be aware principle. And there's so much more we can go in there, but I was a little bit worried about time today. So we're just going to do those three, and then we're going to talk about the next principle. And that's the be strong principle. Crisis reveals us. It doesn't make us. Just like an orange, when an orange is squeezed, what comes out? Juice. When you squeeze a lemon, the inside comes out. And the same in leadership. When you're in a crisis, it exposes who you are. It exposes the leadership. It exposes the problems. So I think it's extremely important as a leader to be strong in who you are. Know your convictions, know what's right and wrong, and have a strong identity. So I want to go through some different strategies of a crisis leader. And the first one is decide who you are now. I coached hockey for a really long time. It was one of the greatest phases of my life, but it always amazed me during the course of a hockey game how the mood on the bench could change. When you're winning and when things are going your way, it's all high fives and fist bumps and great jobs. But as soon as the momentum of a game shifts, each player reacts a little bit different. Some players turn on each other. It's all your fault. They start blaming each other. Some players turn on the ref. Life's not fair. The game's not fair. This is wrong. Others almost turn to violence. They start taking actions or become chippy themselves. And yet others indulge in blaming themselves and they collapse inwards. Now, I think it's really important as a leader that you decide what values and what virtues you want to have. You have to decide now, because during a crisis or when the momentum shifts against you, you have to be prepared. So that's kind of the first thing I suggest we do is we sit down and decide what type of leader we want to be. Now, there's some common values that most people give when they talk about being a leader. But the next phase is not only do we need to know the word, we need to understand what it is. Now, I know myself, bravery was always on the list, right? Especially when I was a young firefighter. Being brave was what I thought it was all about. I remember we went to a warehouse fire when I was really new on the job. We show up, heavy smoke showing, some flames are starting to show, and I go in with a team. I think there was a team of 4 of us, a captain, 3 firefighters. I was second in the line, and we get down to the bottom of these stairs, and the captain says, "Nope, we're leaving. It's too hot in here." So we backed out of the fire, and I was so frustrated because I'm like, that's not who I want to be. That's not what I want to be as a firefighter. As that fire progressed, they sent a team in through a window to see if they could get a hold of this thing. And I was about to enter that window. I so wanted to prove my bravery and prove my salt. And as I was climbing into that window, the team inside climbed out, and not a minute later, the entire building collapsed. Now I look back on that and I realize that bravery isn't about being fearless. I believe being fearless is actually quite reckless. I believe bravery is about standing up for what's right and saying what needs to be said, and being the man that says, no, we're not doing this anymore. I believe that's courage. There's another story about a chief. They had gone in, some firefighters had gone down. They'd sent a rescue team, and all of a sudden that rescue team went down. And the chief stood in front of the door and said, nobody else is going in here today. That's bravery. Being reckless isn't brave. The next one is honesty. Now, it sounds really easy, being honest. Don't tell a lie. Be a good person. But the older I get, the more I realize that honesty is one of the hardest things in the world to accomplish, because to me, it now means you have to be 100% honest with yourself. So instead of just getting frustrated with the dishes in the sink, you have to look at it and go, what am I really mad at? You know what? I'm mad at what happened a couple of days ago. It's easy to hide behind emotions sometimes. But being honest being honest also solves problems, because when you get really detailed about what you're upset about or what the problem is, the solutions become more clear. So I believe honesty as a leader, at least honesty with yourself. You don't have to tell your team everything, but you better absolutely be honest with yourself. And I believe that's one of the virtues every leader should have. The next one is integrity. Now, there's many businesses out there that claim integrity. Imagine walking into your bank, a bank that claims integrity, claims customer satisfaction, and customer relationship is number one. You walk in there thinking they have your best interests at heart. And when you leave, days later, you find out they've opened a number of accounts in your name just to meet their sales targets. And that's what happened with Wells Fargo in 2016. There was so much pressure on their salespeople to meet targets that the company lost its integrity. You couldn't trust them anymore. So I think integrity, and I think that's a great discussion. What do you guys believe it means? No?
Anybody?
Okay.
Else?
I 100% think integrity is the core of any, especially service-based business. If you can't bring your integrity to the table and people know that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, then you don't have a product to sell other than yourself. So to me, it's more definitely about the honesty, the integrity, making sure that they know who they're working with, and it's not a surprise that comes up later on or something.
Actually, that's an interesting answer, Leona, because most people they buy from people. It's, the brand they like, but if they don't like the people who are selling it, who are bringing it forward, they will step away from it. And that's just, a lot of times that's just human nature. And so again, the talk about integrity, I think, is hugely important.
Well, it's interesting because I talked about Wells Fargo, but I had an experience the other day at Memory Express in Calgary, and I don't know anything about computers. I'm an easy mark for a good salesman. I would have bought anything he had. Then I went in there and I said to the young man behind the counter, I said, "Listen, my son needs a computer. My son's mom thinks this is a computer he should buy from Amazon," but I said, "I don't know anything about computers." And he looked at me and said, "Well, listen, 10 out of 10 times you come through that door, I'm going to give you good advice." He's like, "I may not sell you a computer, but I'm going to give you good advice. What are you looking at for your son?" And I showed it to him. He's like, "That's a great deal. You need to go buy that right now. I can't even match it." Well, for the rest of my life, I'll go there to buy computers forever because I know that he's going to put my needs above his own. And what it comes down to, I believe, integrity is the promises you make to yourself. So the young man at Memory Express said 10 out of 10 times, I'm going to give good advice. That promise he made himself. And in the short term, it costs him money. But in the long term, it becomes sustainable because that business will come back. It just takes some time. That's one of the challenges with integrity, is it's not rewarded right away, especially in today's world. Integrity is definitely not valued. So there's not much discussion. So then the next thing with integrity is how, I believe it's a muscle, and I believe integrity can be built. But the question is, how do you build it? And if you define integrity as a promise you make to yourself, how much do I trust myself? Write out my values and know I'm going to keep them. Then you build integrity by keeping the promises you make to yourself, even the small ones. You become steadfast in your word, and you don't make commitments to yourself that you're going to break. So that comes to, if I said I'm going to get up tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. and go to the gym, then I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. and go to the gym. And if I know I'm not going to go to the gym tomorrow morning, I'm not going to make that promise to myself. So I think that becomes really integral in integrity. And the other one is stuff like the cold water plunge. When you say you're going to get in, you get in. You don't leave yourself room to back out. You keep the promises you make to yourself. Does that resonate with you guys? Does that make sense?
You mentioned the cold water plunge, and yes, I did one of those polar bear plunges quite a few years ago. But what you say is exactly right because if you'd have just walked in and put your toe in and put, and then a little bit more, you'd have never got in. So this wasn't a plunge. We actually had to run into the lake in between the ice flows. And again, you ran as fast as you could. Because if you didn't get up to your neck really quickly, you were not going to get in. And that goes with so many things in life.
When it's all about that hesitation, right? If you hesitate at the edge, now all of a sudden you've given room. Where if no, my word is, I said I'm going to do it. There's no stopping, right? But I think like we were talking earlier, in this world that we're in, integrity's getting more and more lost out there. People are looking after themselves instead of looking after their honor in a lot of ways. Any other thoughts on integrity? No.
I think
Go ahead, Bella.
I'm just going to keep talking because no one else is. Integrity is interesting. Like, I just had a phone call this morning of a client that called and wanted to buy a house. And just last year alone, I was in touch with them again. We did a full application, and it turned out that where they currently were to renew their mortgage was the best place for them to be. So they renewed. And I worked hard with them. Like, I did a whole application, did a couple hours worth of work with them, and then just gave them advice, like, and said, well, if I was you, this is what I'd go do. And it wasn't to work with me. And so, because the bank was really being very aggressive to keep their business. And so now it's interesting. A year later, I get a call this morning and they want to do a purchase of a different house. And I know that they just renewed last year. So I know they've got a penalty that they're going to deal with. And so it's funny, I was talking with them like, well, I really think you should check out with your bank and see if they'll port your mortgage because you're going to pay a huge penalty if you move right now. And she's like, but Leona, I really want to work with you. And I'm like, I really want to work with you too. But it's funny because I learned later that she'd given my name to someone else and I didn't know the connection. And I was like, oh, you mean so-and-so. And so she'd referred another client to me. So it didn't come from business from her, but it came from business that she referred. And so I think, again, today it was just funny to be put back in that spot again that, well, actually, yeah, go check out what they're going to offer you. And I'd be happy to help you if they don't want to offer you something good, kind of thing. But it's always putting that client first. And another example I can think of right now is we were just meeting with a Chamber of Commerce this morning, and we're talking about how do we get people to be invested in coming to an event or coming and being part of the chamber. And a lot of people come with the idea of, well, what am I going to get out of it? And I think when we change our perspective and think, well, what can I give to it? I really think that can change the environment so positively, where in my business, a lot of times it's competitive, or real estate, it's competitive and not collaborative. And I love my perspective is so much, let's be collaborative because, we're going to, in general, help the industry as a whole. So I don't know if you guys experience that in your industries or not, but I think moving from competitiveness to collaborativeness is the key in regards to having good integrity in our industries.
It's a challenging world in that regard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, I think after COVID, everybody turned, okay, I'm going to look after me. And we've lost a lot of the community. I know it's getting harder and harder to get people to even to engage, even at work, it's harder and harder to get people to engage.
Well, I even think on this call, on this webinar, I know for sure that there are at least 5-6 people on here who are Maxwell Leadership Training coaches, and they do leadership training. But I can guarantee you that each one of us has a very different passion, a very different kind of target market or people that we reach, a community that we reach. And in that regard, I think to what Leona said, that collaborative working together as a community works far better than us thinking that we're all competing with each other, because we're not competing with each other. We don't at all have the same circles of people that we influence.
It's interesting too, because even when you are competing with each other, it ends up being collaborative. And as a real estate agent, I find myself, the more collaborative I am, the more deals I get done. Right. And they don't come, you get the phone call of, hey, can you do this for me? And all of a sudden you're making money in places you didn't think you'd ever make. So, but it's hard. You have to check your ego out of I'm in competition. Right? It's been my experience.
I really like your definition of integrity. I put a little, we talk about in integrity and audits a lot because I put a little thing in the chat there, going beyond honesty and often having the bigger picture in mind. And so I often think about it, because I'm not involved with audits every day, thankfully. But I often think about it as having this says public interest, right? But having the organizational or the person's interest in mind versus what can I get out of it? Kind of like you were saying with real estate versus how can we just make it better for everyone? And kind of my HR background I get to work with really good people on the worst days of their life. And so I try to remember that is how do we be humane? How do we do what we have to for the organization? But how do we allow the person to be the best they can on their worst day of their life or worst days of their life? So appreciate the conversation on integrity, because it is a bit like trying to nail Jello to the wall. It's a kind of a bit opaque of a concept.
It's actually very opaque. And just to add to what everyone's been saying, I've always looked at integrity as, are you willing to sacrifice to the maximum for the right thing or for the right person? Because again, it's not about me being right, it's about doing it right. And at times that means you've got to sacrifice yourself as an individual.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's and in my experience, your body will tell you if you're not living in integrity, your body will tell you. You won't sleep at night. You'll have chronic pain. You'll have headaches all the time. You may not tune into it right away, but you will know. And that's no way to lead. That's no way to move forward. You've got to check that for sure. Got to check in with that all the time.
Yeah. But again, it takes time before it ingrains, right? So often short-term gain, if people focus on that, then it's easy to sell your integrity down.
It goes back to what you're saying about breathing earlier on. Return to that basic. Breathe in and breathe out and find out what's really real and what's really not.
Yeah, just slow it down.
Yeah.
Actually, just a comment on the breathing bit, and I can say this from years working in emergency services. If you don't do the breathing bit and really count it out, and sometimes you got to count to 10 before you breathe out, and then 10 before you breathe in again. If you're breathing too fast, the first thing you do is you hyperventilate, and that just messes your whole world up. And I've seen some really funny events and really nasty events when we get into that sympathetic response with hyperventilation. So breathing's a good thing. Just do it properly.
Yeah. So with that, the next virtue that I want to talk about, and I'd love your guys' input on this, because I struggle with it all the time. I struggle with it as a firefighter, as a father, as in all aspects of my life. And the virtue is have confidence. And there's a difference between the confidence of a 21-year-old life coach that thinks they can do everything, but not so much. I'm talking about the confidence that you really can. You can back it up. And there's kind of two steps to confidence. I believe there's optimism, the belief you can do anything, and there's hope. And that's when that's an action. You take a step forward to making things the way they should be. And it's the difference between being a lone ranked hockey team going into the playoffs. Optimism is the mom saying, hey, to the player on the losing side, you can do it. On the way to the game, she can pump them up. But hope is when they score the first goal and they actually get a belief. So the question I have for the group is how do we build confidence? How do we How do we ingrain that, especially in a world that's so uncertain as the one we're in?
I'm going to take it a little different direction in my answer, because confidence is something that's needed. And oddly enough, and I can say in the 20,000 plus emergency responses I've done, just walking in with the uniform, people say they're confident you can do it when, the number of times that I was scared or whatever, is many. But the other part of confidence is knowing when you can't do it or knowing what you can't do and just saying it. I can't do that. Because what it does is it shows that you've got an area of expertise, an area that you're good at. But you also know that there's an area that you've got to reach out and get help at. And that's where we need that collaborative team to build together. That's where we need that collaboration to make a better outcome. Two heads are better than one, and teamwork is necessary. So I really think when it comes to being confident, it's not just confident what you can do, it's confident what you can't do.
But so I'm just gonna. So one of the challenges as a leader, I want a leader who gives me an impression that we'll get through anything. So, and I've been in that situation because I 100% believe in saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm uncertain here. But I also believe that you have to do it in such a way that the people that are following you still have faith, right? So it almost, and one of the strategies I use there is you chunk it down. You chunk it down really far. And you go, I don't know, I may not be able to accomplish the whole goal, but I know I can do this little bit. And you just take that first little step. And from that first step, more opportunities arise. And then you just take the next step. Am I on the right track with that, Sterling, or were you more
absolutely? You're absolutely on the right track with that, because the other part of it, and actually, if you look at the Navy SEALs, and they do it very, very well, the leader will come out with a plan, but everyone's got the opportunity to speak into that plan and change it. And that's something that brings it out, because we can be confident, but I've learned over many years that what I'm confident in is based on only the information I have in front of me. Carl, you got your hand up, and I think Leona does too. Carl, you're on mute, Carl.
Trying. Sorry, yes. It's an interesting question, situation, confidence. In my experience as a leader as well, confidence comes with trusting your team. And just in a practical example, I've been leading project teams for many, many years. And especially in the last 10 plus years, leading projects in a software development environment where I know very little about coding and development. So the confidence comes with, I know what my team can do. Because I step into meetings and I know if the client is going to ask me a question, 9 out of 10 times, I will not be able to answer the question if I'm on my own. Therefore, my confidence as a leader comes with my team that can do stuff that I can't do. And I think somebody said, I know my limitations. I know what I know and what I don't know. Therefore, I can fill the gaps with the people around me that I take with me. And that gives me confidence. Not sure if that makes sense.
Well, actually, it makes real cool sense, because you're not leading unless you have a team. As Maxwell would put it, you're just on a journey. You're just on a walk. Leona, you've got your hand up, not two hands, one.
Yeah, I was just thinking in my head, and actually I think Carl just addressed it too, is I feel most confident in the people around me when I know them well. So for instance, if I have spent the time building relationships with the people around me, and I know Julie quite well, for instance, I've gotten to know her over the past year and a half. And the more time I spend with her, the more confident I am in our relationship. And I think that can go with clients, it can go with teammates. I had an old boss that used to say, well, competence develops confidence. And so like in a hockey situation, as the kids learn their skills and they get stronger in their skills, they get more confident. Or if I learn different types of mortgages, or a new experience comes across and I've never done it before. I don't feel very confident, but once I've done it, then it builds my confidence that I can do it again, right? So I think the more you know, the more you build, the more knowledge in the people around you, and the more of your processes, the more confident you'll show yourself to be.
Well, I think that very much speaks to what the last gentleman said about empowering your team, right? And the more you empower your team, the more confidence you get in them and you build into your team, right? To practice those skills, and you give everybody an opportunity to win, and that builds.
Really quite passionate about the topic of competence and confidence and mentorship and leadership. About a decade ago, well, almost 2 decades ago now, I was a co-chair of a group that brought the various health, science, anywhere you had someone, a mentee and a mentor. In my area, of course, is education. So as a teacher and wanting to be a teacher, but Ralph and Walker, and it was Walker who I was working with. We had Ralph there as a guest as well, but they talk about an adaptive leadership model where the leader adapts to where the mentee is on this high confidence, low competence quadrant that I put in the chat there. And yeah, it was 2023 with the most recent journal article that I wrote around this topic. But I think it's a fascinating topic about, from a leadership standpoint, but as well as from a mentorship, a menteeship standpoint of, is it adaptive in a way that the leader or the mentor adapts their approach depending on where the person's competence and confidence lies. Anyway, I find it very, very fascinating and very helpful as I go about my daily life, as I try to adapt versus expect other people to adapt to me.
You know, and that's actually a really good comment, you know, Bob, because it's, you know, we've got to meet the audience as a leader, because that's where that trust is built.
So
It's a great document that you shared there in the chat, Bob. So if everybody hasn't picked that up from the chat, you should save it somewhere.
Thanks. If you have insomnia, I'll send you the link as well to the journal article, and it will for sure put you to sleep. But it's the last part of this the article that this little chart is from, and again, it's from Ralph and Walker's, who were University of Saskatchewan professors, but they did this as a pan-Canadian study that we referenced in our journal article.
perfect. So I think because we're going to run out of time, so we'll kind of move on from confidence. But thank you for the great chat. The next thing I want to talk about, as far as crisis leadership or leadership in general, is how you focus on your impact. Where are we at? Oh, these were my ideas for confidence. I can briefly run you through those, but I'd love the chat more than anything else. But to build confidence, you have to have contingencies. So in today's world, you don't want to be in a position where you're filled with anxiety and worry, especially when you're a leader of a team. But with what's going on in the States and the unrest in the world, you also have to be aware of what's going on. So build confidence is have contingencies. And the way on the fireground that we run contingencies, if we roll up and we start doing a vehicle extrication, we have a plan A. This is how we're going to get the person out. We have a plan B and a plan C. And we start all three of those plans. I'll assign a team to each different plan. And that gives me confidence that no matter what, we're going to get this person out. The next piece is to focus on your wins. And that's a personal one. How often, and put it in the chat, how often do you guys lay in bed at night and think about everything you did wrong during the day versus lay in bed at night and think about all the things you did right? And that's a subtle shift, and it's a really hard shift. But if you can make that shift, your confidence will grow. Control your body and your state. Tony Robbins has made a career based on explaining that, right? Stand strong, be strong, move around. And then the last one that I feel on building confidence is practice. So often we, especially as adults, we show up to the game without having practiced. And if you move back to the hockey analogy where the players start to turn on themselves or turn on each other or turn on the ref, you have to run through, okay, how am I going to handle that situation? I know that situation's coming. How do I manage it? So yeah, those are some of the different ways I had for confidence. And the last thing, we've got 10 minutes left. I believe it's really important to understand your mission. And I think so often in life we get sidetracked with where we're going and what we're supposed to be doing. 2013 floods. We showed up for work. I was part of the boat team. That's me drinking Gatorade while my buddy does all the work. We showed up for work expecting we're going to use every piece of our training today. We're going to do all those wild and crazy things that I've always wanted to do. We're going to do them today. But in reality, we didn't need to. I had a near-death experience. It was quite wild, as you can see here. And we put a jet boat onto the street. We got called to a rescue. Man, upstream, needs help. So we put the jet boat, I backed it in from a gas station, backed it down a ramp. We fire up the jet boat. We go heading up to see if we can find this fella. And all of a sudden, the engine dies. And all of a sudden, we're floating down towards the Bow River, which if we'd entered the Bow River, we're in a lot of trouble. And there's nobody coming to help us. So it was pretty much a guaranteed death sentence if we'd ended up in the river. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the boat fired up. We were able to get upstream. We find this man, and he was sitting on shore just fine. He was late for work and couldn't cross the river. So as you look at things, you go, what's my actual mission here? And I find in life, the more I define my mission, the better off I do. So Tony Robbins talks a lot about it spelling on the thing. Tony Robbins talks a lot about know your outcomes. So instead of a healthy outcome being, I want to lose 20 pounds, if you make your outcome, I want to feel strong and vibrant, it becomes easier to manage. The next one is relationships. Instead of, it's hard to define what you really want in a situation, but the more you define it, the better off you're going to be. Does that resonate at all? Oh. Sorry, guys.
It does resonate quite well. You know, the funny thing is that a lot of times we'll head into something, and as we define it, we realize it's not as bad as it seems, or maybe it's worse than it seems. But we've got to understand what we're doing. Like, what's the leader's number one job? Number one job is to define reality. What do I actually see? And Scott, I know myself, just like you, so many times we've walked into situations and I've had to ask, what do I actually see here?
And what's the actual outcome that I can do? Because like on that day with the river doing what it was doing, we couldn't stop the river. We couldn't change what was going on. So as long as people were on the shore, there was nothing more to do. We couldn't stop your house from getting flooded, but we could stop, there was no point in taking huge risks for very little gain. Right. And I think so often in life, if you're not clear on what your goal is, you end up taking risks and actions and you can hurt yourself.
I think too that sometimes we think about crisis.
Absolutely. Is there
I was just saying, I think sometimes we can think about crisis leadership in
Sorry,
regard to.
Julie, cut out.
Oh, it's okay. I'll let you guys talk then.
So,
well, actually, we hear you, but you kept leaving out one word, which was really kind of weird how that worked out.
yeah,
She was talking about crisis leadership.
So just to kind of wrap up, once we look at our mission we know what it really is, I believe as leaders, we can all agree it comes down to people. And that's why this is my favorite quote of all time. People forget what you said. They'll forget what you did. But they'll never forget how you made them feel. So,
Well, thank you, Scott. That was really, really good. Well, you can put it back to your QR code there so people can flash your code if you want. Any questions for Scott here? Thank you very much, because it's always good to see, the perspectives of, people who've worked through crisis, in the emergent situation. And I'm pretty sure most of us all can stand back and say, emergent situation and, a crisis in family life. Now they're very similar because we're human. And, just in emergent situations, you got to move way faster.
yeah. Well, I think in emergent situations, it strips away everything else. Race, politics, nothing matters. And you get to see people at the core. And that helps you define what's going on. Yeah.
So do we have any questions for Scott before we wrap up here? We got 4 minutes left. No, Scott, I'm going to get you to stop sharing your screen then, and just a couple more things to wrap stuff up. And again, if you've got questions, put your hands up, please. And I'm going to share my screen. Let me just give me a second here. And just a couple other things coming up. So, like with High Road Leaders, again, thank you very much, Scott, for presenting today. And again, we could probably, if we really got into it, talk for hours about leadership and crisis. And looking at the group here, there's probably lots of different stories. But just to give a little update, we had Scott here today. Next month, April 11th, we've got Communication for Leaders. And coming up, Carol Mayer from Nova Scotia, lots of experience using the DISC and communication formats in order to really learn to communicate. And it's not just for leaders, it's communication in general. Just understanding that. May 8th, we've got, and it's hiding the title here, and I will get it wrong if I don't click on the button. But we've got a webinar for decision making under pressure. And with a lot of times, Leona working in the mortgage industry, or Bob working with different healthcare and stuff, and all the whole group here, there are some times that we've got to make a decision, well, even with our family, that we're under a lot of pressure. So we're going to be having spending an hour talking about that and going over decision making under pressure. Then going back to our other upcoming events. Here is just going to load up here, but coming up in the month of June, for those who are in the Calgary area, you're all welcome. Even our people from England, you're more than welcome to come down and join us. We're doing the Legacy of Impact Leadercast. It's going to be Friday, June 6th from 9 to 4. Now the location is changing, so please check the website. We had a discussion before Julie head off to Florida about changing the location. Really great location. There's also going to be two other live events in Nova Scotia, one in Sydney, Nova Scotia, and one in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And the dates, and I do apologize, they're not up here right yet. I believe it's the 10th and the 13th. Glenn, am I correct on that?
It was the 10th or the 11th, but yeah.
The 10th and the 11th. And so
no, the 11th and 13th, I think it is.
The 11th and 13th. Oh, you can check on the website. We'll have the dates and locations there. And then there will be the virtual presentation of Leadercast, which will be the 18th of June. And that'll be up on the website here. We look forward to, this group getting together all the time. And for those who we can just see the name more, please reach out, connect with High Road Leaders, but also connect within the group, ask questions. There's a lot of people here with a lot of experience, but we don't have your experience. We don't understand you. We don't each of our experiences is important, and each one we can learn from. And it doesn't matter if you're bringing up a parent experience, a business experience, an emergency service experience, or just some bizarre experience that you've had. So, again, thank you very much. Hold on, Scott. Thank you very much. And any other questions or comments? I'll keep this going for the next 2-3 minutes, and but if not, you guys have a really good day. Oh, Julie,
Need to wrap up.
looks like you
Wrap up.
and we're gonna wrap it up.
Yep.
So
Thanks
so
for
as
coming,
you
and we'll
guys
see you all
disappear,
next week.
Thank
Thanks,
you guys.
Scott.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Sterling. Thanks for having me.
take care, guys.